So hi, I'm Mahesti Okitasari. I'm a research associate at UNUIS. So in the next few minutes, I would like to share a bit with you on the a linkage between tea productions and our effort to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a cup of tea for the SDGs. So you may have knows already about the 2013 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015. This agenda provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planets, and it's actually at the heart of this agenda are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or often referred as the SDGs. These are an urgent call for actions by all countries, developed and developing countries, to form a global partnership to end poverty and other deprivations. This effort must go hand in hand with the strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and attempt to increase the economic growth while tackling the climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. So how important tea in all these efforts? Tea actually play a significant role in rural developments and poverty reductions, and also food securities in exporting and developing countries. Tea is a principal source of livelihood for millions of smallholders, producers. Tea productions and exports actually generate quite a lot foreign exchange and employment, and also provide a material base for national economic growth. They make significant contributions to food security by helping to cover food import bills. For example, in 10 years ago, the tea export earning actually pay for 55% of food import bills in Kenya and 71% in Sri Lanka. So that's quite a lot. However, the specific agroecological conditions where we usually have tea plantations are actually taking place in areas which are highly vulnerable to climate change. As you know, tea plantations often found in areas with high biodiversity and are associated with the destructions of a tropical forest. The drying process of the tea can require up to 1 hectare of timber for every 3 hectares of tea. So to ensure the benefit for both people and the environment, the tea value chain must be sustainable at all stages, from field to the cup that we can enjoy today. So the tea sector is actually characterized by many interconnected issues. That's why how important it is to tackle this in our effort to achieve the SDGs. From economic perspective, the tea productions actually facing issues such as oversupply, low prices, lack of transparency at auctions, and also low wages. You may notice that tea is actually a labor-intensive sectors that provide jobs and incomes to many of the poorest rural communities, this including women and their families. So smallholder families and the smallholder farmers and farming households actually produce quite a lot. So 60% of the global tea outputs. So these tea estates remain a source of primary incomes in many areas. And governments actually rely on them as an alternative to state-funded welfare system in the countryside. This is because estates are generally responsible to provide certain basic services to the workers. This is include housing, sanitation, health, water, and educations, which are not always adequate. There are also reports that discriminations against selected communities taking place in these tea estates. So at the same time, we also see that women often have less access to resources such as land and finance. So in a whole, a new approach is needed if living standards are to rise in these tea estates and to prevent race to the bottom for social, environment, and occupational health standards. On the environmental issues, factors such as deforestation, erosions, and decreased soil fertility, also the agrochemical use is actually have an influence on tea productions. And in a site that climate variability, incidence of frost, and also pests is actually beginning to affect the productivity of the tea. So addressing all of these issues in the tea supply chains can actually help countries to achieve several SDGs. This is among these 4 that you see on the screen is just a few. That I would like to elaborate a bit more. So for SDG 1 and 2, for example, to end world hunger and poverty, we must transform our agri-food system. And in this case, a tea can actually play a lot of roles in the transformations. So in Vietnam, for example, they're facing a lot of the heavy rains and overuse of agrochemicals that have led to poor quality of crops and the declined reputation of Vietnamese tea within the global export markets. So farmers were unlucky to have steep gradients of their tea plantations. Actually, the one without the sufficient tea covers have to cover loss due to frequent landslides and severe crop damage. So reducing or stopping the use of pesticide and applying organic methods to control pests actually can boost the soil nutrition, and this is beneficial in this case. Also, a method to intercrop tea with legumes, which can replenish and fix the nitrogen into the soil. In Sri Lanka, about 75% of the tea comes from small growers, mostly consisting up to, let's say, 4 hectares of family grown estates. And these account for about 60% of the total area cultivated. So that's quite a lot. And in these tea plantations, tea plucking and weedlings are female dominance. And it is common also for the large plantation sectors to have them. However, the women responsibility and the smaller tea estates on the family grown estates is much greater. So they're not just plucking the leaves, but also responsibility of maintaining the whole plot is rests on the women's shoulders. So the successful tea smallholding can actually provide a stable income for women, and including enabling them to come out of debt and save some money. So empowering women in sustainable tea productions can actually uplift the economic conditions, not just the woman, but the whole family. So better economic conditions mean better access to nutrition and other services such as health and education for families. So it's also cover SDG 1, 2, 4, 5. It's just for the direct one. In terms of the cases in Lao PDR, in the northern part of Laos, efforts are ongoing on building the inclusive governance on the tea sectors through better management of knowledge, communications, and also development of a national strategic plan. So the attempt to encourage greater inclusions of the small producer, particularly women in terms of decision making. And the idea is to improve the sustainable management of tea plantations, particularly those in the forest with the forest trees. So this is also an issues of management plans and securing of lands. So how the SDG could help navigate these complex tea terrains? And actually, the SDG could help tea tell its story. They are the impact, the SDGs are the impact that the tea industries and we as a tea consumer working to achieve. So the success of achieving a sustainable tea sectors actually hinge on our ability to balance SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and productions, and in our effort to enable economic development, or SDG 8, for the tea smallholders and in a way that can conserve the life on land, which is SDG 15. So all of this effort should be done within the effort to alleviate poverty, SDG 1, and to achieve food security, and SDG 2, and to combat climate change, which is SDG 13. Because the issues of that we shared a bit earlier on this surrounding tea productions are interconnected, as well as the SDG itself is also interconnected. So each intervention can actually produce multiple outcomes that we need to be aware of. For example, the producer country policies affect how the nature is managed, the condition and social structures under which the tea smallholder lives, and the availability of infrastructures and investment that can sustain the tea supply. For example, a national food policy in Kenya incorporate also tea, and it's provide guideline on the management, farming, marketing. So integrating SDGs into such policy can improve the tea value chains in line with our effort to achieve the SDG. So I would say that the all effort has to go from field to the cup that we drink in effort to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.